Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you were there? Or maybe you've misplaced your keys again and found them in the refrigerator instead of your purse. If that sounds familiar, don't worry, you're not alone. We all have those little slip-ups now and then, but sometimes they can be more than just senior moments. And today, I want to talk to you, heart to heart, about something that affects millions of older adults around the world, often quietly and gradually: dementia. Now, before you get worried or click away, let me say this. This video isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to empower you. Because the truth is, the earlier we notice the signs, the more we can do to slow things down, get support, and keep living the independent, full life we all deserve. You see, dementia doesn't start with dramatic changes. It often begins with little things, subtle shifts that can be easy to brush off. But if we know what to look for, we can take action early, and that can make all the difference. So today, we're going to talk about the early warning signs of dementia, the ones you should never ignore. And I promise, this won't be a medical lecture. This is a conversation, just like we're sitting together on the porch, having a cup of tea, talking about how to stay sharp, aware, and in control of our health. Let's begin with one of the most common signs: memory loss that disrupts daily life. Now, forgetting someone's name occasionally, or needing to look up a phone number, that's perfectly normal. But if you find yourself asking the same questions over and over, or if you're relying more and more on notes, reminders, or even other people just to get through your day, that could be something more. One woman I spoke with recently said she started forgetting whether she'd eaten breakfast or whether she'd taken her medications. And those aren't small things. When your memory starts to interfere with your routine, it's time to pay attention. But here's the good news: you're not helpless. If you're noticing this in yourself or someone you care about, speak up. There are memory exercises, lifestyle changes, and even treatments that can help. The key is catching it early and not waiting until it gets worse. Another subtle sign is difficulty planning or solving problems. Maybe you used to pay all the bills on time without blinking an eye, or maybe following a recipe was second nature to you. But lately, balancing the checkbook leaves you feeling confused. You start making mistakes with numbers or forgetting steps in a process you've done 100 times. That's not just forgetfulness. It's your brain telling you it's struggling with something it used to do easily. I remember my uncle, a man who could once fix anything from a squeaky door to a broken watch, starting to avoid tasks he used to enjoy. At first, we thought he was just getting tired, but it turned out he was overwhelmed. It wasn't that he didn't want to do them, it was that he couldn't quite figure out how anymore, and he didn't want anyone to know. That's the thing with dementia. It can make people feel embarrassed or scared, so they try to hide it. That's why it's so important to notice not just what someone says, but what they're avoiding. If a loved one who used to love cooking suddenly stops using the stove, or the bills start piling up when they never used to, those might be clues. And it's okay to talk about it, gently and with love. Now, there's another early sign that often surprises people: difficulty completing familiar tasks. This one can be sneaky because it doesn't look like a memory issue on the surface. Imagine this. You've driven to the same grocery store for years, but suddenly, you can't remember how to get there. Or you sit down at your favorite card game, the one you play every week, and you can't quite remember how it starts. These aren't things you're learning for the first time. They're habits, routines. So when they start slipping, it's not just aging, it could be a sign of something deeper. If you or someone you care about seems to be getting lost in the middle of routine activities, or suddenly forgets how to operate the TV remote or turn off the washing machine, that's worth noticing. It's easy to blame it on being tired or distracted or even stressed, but don't brush it off. These patterns matter. And here's something you may not expect: confusion with time or place. We all lose track of the date sometimes, but dementia can make a person forget where they are or how they got there. They might think it's morning when it's really night, or feel confused about why they're at the doctor's office even after you just told them. They may even struggle with the concept of time itself, not understanding what next week means or believing a memory from years ago just happened yesterday. It can be frightening for them and for you. But again, awareness is the first step. If someone is frequently confused about the date, the season, or even the year, or if they get lost in a familiar setting, it's time to talk to a doctor. It doesn't mean life is over. It just means a new chapter may be beginning, and you'll want to face it prepared. These early signs may sound small, but together they can paint a powerful picture. And the sooner we see that picture clearly, the sooner we can act. So, now that we've talked about memory loss, trouble with problem solving, and getting confused about time and place, let's continue this conversation and explore what other changes we should be paying close attention to. Now, another change that often slips under the radar is trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. That might sound complicated, but really, it shows up in simple everyday ways. For instance, maybe you or someone close to you starts having trouble reading even though their eyesight hasn't changed. Or maybe reaching for a glass of water results in knocking it over instead. People might start bumping into furniture more often, misjudging steps, or even struggling to recognize familiar faces. One gentleman I met shared that he suddenly found it difficult to follow the action during his favorite baseball game. Not because the game had changed, but because his brain couldn't quite track where the ball was going or who was running where. It was subtle at first, but it made him feel frustrated and a little embarrassed. These kinds of changes can affect driving too. Judging distances, reacting to traffic signs, or even understanding what you're seeing in the rearview mirror can become confusing. That's why it's so important not to chalk these things up to just getting older. If visual or spatial awareness is slipping, it's something to take seriously. It's not about being afraid. It's about staying safe and staying ahead of the problem. Speaking of changes, another one that often takes people by surprise is new problems with words, either speaking or writing. We all have moments when the right word is just out of reach. You know the one. You can picture the thing, but the name just won't come out. That's normal. But if that starts happening all the time, or if it feels like your ability to have a simple conversation is slipping, that's worth noticing. You might find yourself stopping mid-sentence, unsure how to continue, or repeating a phrase over and over trying to find the right word. A neighbor of mine, a woman who used to love chatting at her garden club, suddenly became quiet. At first we thought she was just tired or shy, but later, she admitted it was because she kept forgetting the names of flowers she'd known for years, and she didn't want to sound silly. When someone starts calling familiar objects by the wrong name, like saying watch thing instead of clock, or they have trouble understanding what others are saying, that's a red flag. And when writing becomes hard, forgetting how to spell simple words or putting together a grocery list that no longer makes sense, those are signs the brain is working harder than it should just to keep up. And here's something else to be mindful of: misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. We've all lost our glasses and found them on our heads. But with dementia, it's more than that. It's not just losing an item, it's placing it somewhere unusual and then having no idea how it got there or how to find it again. Think about putting your remote control in the freezer, or finding your shoes inside the microwave. These sound like jokes, but they really happen. And what's more telling is that when you ask the person where the item might be, they can't remember even having used it, let alone where they last saw it. Even more concerning, some people may start accusing others of stealing simply because they can't locate something they themselves misplaced. That kind of confusion can cause tension in families. So if this sounds familiar, it's not about blame. It's about understanding that something deeper might be happening, and it's time to have a compassionate, supportive conversation. All of this brings us to another subtle but important sign: decreased or poor judgment. This one can show up in unexpected ways. Maybe a person who was always cautious suddenly starts giving money away to strangers or telemarketers. Or someone who always dressed neatly begins wearing the same dirty clothes for days. Judgment isn't just about big decisions. It's about the little ones we make every day, often without thinking. I knew a man who had always been sharp with his money, budgeted everything, double-checked every bill. But slowly, his family noticed that he was missing payments. Then he started signing up for strange magazine subscriptions or giving out his bank information to people who called on the phone. It was heartbreaking because he didn't see anything wrong with it. That's the tricky part. When judgment begins to slip, people often don't realize it themselves. This can also apply to health. Someone might stop going to the doctor or neglect taking medications they've taken for years. Or they might make unsafe choices, like going out in the cold without a coat or leaving the stove on. These things aren't just forgetful, they can be dangerous. And they often come from that subtle change in how the brain makes decisions. So, what can we do? Well, the first step is always awareness. If you notice changes in how someone makes decisions, spends money, or takes care of themselves, it's okay to speak up. The key is to do it gently. Come from a place of care, not criticism. Phrases like, "I've noticed you haven't been yourself lately," or "I'm a little worried about you. Can we talk?" go a long way. Because when it comes to dementia, silence helps no one. But support, honesty, and early action can make a world of difference. We've talked about changes in vision, language, misplaced items, and judgment, and how they might seem small, but can point to something deeper. And there are still more signs to look out for, ones that show up in behavior, in personality, and in how we interact with the world around us. Sometimes the signs aren't in how we think or remember, but in changes to mood and personality, the kind that even close friends can't quite put their finger on at first. You might notice someone becoming unusually anxious, suspicious, or even fearful of things they were once perfectly comfortable with. A quiet person might suddenly become more irritable. Someone cheerful might grow withdrawn or sad. I remember a woman from our community center, always so lively and full of warmth. She loved to bake, tell stories, and she knew everyone's birthday by heart. But over time, she stopped joining our Thursday tea group. When we did see her, she seemed unsure, even uneasy, like she wasn't sure she belonged. Her daughter later said she'd grown paranoid at home, worried people were watching her, or that her neighbors were plotting against her. It was a complete shift from the person we all knew. That's the thing with dementia. It doesn't just affect memory. It affects how we see the world, how we feel about it, and how we behave. That change in personality can make people feel like strangers in their own lives, and it can make loved ones feel confused and helpless. But understanding that it's a symptom, not a personal change or a bad mood, can help us respond with more compassion and less frustration. This brings us to another sign that can be easy to dismiss: withdrawal from work or social activities. Maybe you used to love bingo night, or you never missed a church potluck. But now, you find yourself making excuses to stay home. Maybe reading the newspaper isn't fun anymore, or your book club feels too hard to follow. It's not because you don't care, but because something inside is quietly changing, and you don't want anyone to notice. When someone begins pulling away from hobbies, conversations, or social connections, it's usually not laziness or aging. It's often because they feel overwhelmed or uncertain. Keeping up with friends can become challenging when you can't quite follow what's being said, or when names and faces start slipping. And rather than feel embarrassed, many folks just retreat. If that sounds familiar, either in yourself or someone close to you, don't brush it off. Gentle encouragement, patience, and routine can help keep those doors open. Invite them back without pressure. Let them know it's okay to just show up and be present. No one expects perfection, just connection. And there's one final sign that we don't talk about enough: difficulty completing familiar tasks. I'm not talking about learning something new. That's always a challenge at any age. I'm talking about things we've done 100 times: cooking a favorite recipe, managing the TV remote, or setting the table. When those daily routines start to feel confusing, when a pot of water goes on the stove and gets forgotten, or the washing machine runs 3 times in a row, that's worth a closer look. One man I spoke to had always been a whiz at fixing things around the house. He could build a shelf or repair a faucet in no time. But one day, he started putting screws in backwards. He couldn't remember which tools he needed. Then he got frustrated and stopped doing repairs altogether. That loss of confidence was heartbreaking, not because of the shelf, but because it chipped away at his independence. Completing tasks involves many parts of the brain: memory, sequencing, attention. When those start to falter, everyday life becomes harder, and if we ignore it, the person starts to feel not only frustrated, but also ashamed. That's why early support matters so much. It gives people a chance to adapt, to find new ways of doing things, and to hold on to what makes them feel like themselves. So where does that leave us? Well, let's pause for a moment and take a deep breath, because this kind of conversation can be heavy, but it's also incredibly hopeful. Why? Because recognizing these signs early gives us power. It gives us time. Time to talk to our doctors, time to plan, time to surround ourselves with support, not just for ourselves, but for the people we love. Dementia doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in quietly, testing the edges of memory, behavior, and identity. But it also gives us chances to step in early, to stay connected, to make choices that preserve dignity and well-being. So if something in today's video resonated with you, don't ignore that instinct. Maybe you've noticed a pattern in your own life, or maybe it reminded you of someone close to you. Either way, you're not alone, and you don't have to navigate this on your own either. Talk to a healthcare provider. Share what you've observed. Write things down. And most importantly, keep showing up, for yourself and for those around you. And before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Have you or someone you know experienced any of these signs? Drop a comment below. Let's make this a place where we can learn from and support one another without fear or shame. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It helps us reach more folks who might need this message. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos on health, wellness, and thriving in your golden years. Because you deserve to feel informed. You deserve to feel empowered. And yes, you deserve to live your best life at every age. Here's to wisdom, awareness, and the strength to take care of what matters most. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.